breathe, breathe, breathe. Dreadful, dreadful, dreadful. Groom, groom, groom. Pony, pony, pony.
Carriage, carriage, carriage.
I must not forget to mention one part of my training, which I have always considered a very great advantage. My master sent me to another farmer's field on the edge of the railway. I joined some sheep and cows there. I shall never forget the first train that ran by. I was feeding quietly on an open land that separated the field from the railway. Suddenly, I heard a strange sound at a distance. Before I knew, a long black train flew by with loud noises and smoke. I couldn't breathe. I turned and ran to the further side of the field as fast as I could. I stood there, breathing heavily with surprise and fear. In the course of the day, many other trains went by, and sometimes made an awful loud sound. I thought it very dreadful. But the cows went on eating very quietly, and hardly raised their heads when the black scary thing rushed by loudly. For the first few days, I could not feed in peace. As I found that this terrible creature never came into the field or did me any harm, I started paying no attention to it, and very soon I cared as little about the passing of a train as the cows and sheep did. Since then I had seen many horses that were very alarmed and uneasy at the sight or sound of a train engine. Thanks to my good master's care, I was not afraid at railway stations or in my own stable. My master often drove me together with my mother, because she was steady and could teach me how to go better. She told me that the better I worked, the better I should be treated, and that it was wisest always to do my best to please my master. She said, "There are different kinds of men. Some, like our master, are good and gentle, and some are bad and cruel. Besides, there are many foolish and careless men who ruin their horses for no good reason. I hope you will fall into good hands. A horse never knows who may buy him or who may drive him. It is all chance for us. Always do your best, wherever you are, and keep up your good name." It was early in May. A man from Squire Gordon's took me away to the hall. My master said, "Goodbye, Darky. Be a good horse, and always do your best." I could not say goodbye, so I put my nose into his hand. He patted me kindly, and I left my first home. Squire Gordon's park was by the village of Birtwick. There was room for many horses and carriages. The stable into which I was taken was very big, with 4 good separate spaces. A large swinging window opened into the yard, which made it fresh and pleasant. The first space was a large square one, shut in behind with a wooden gate. The others were common spaces, good, but not nearly so large. My space was called a loose box. It was clean, sweet, and airy. The horse that was put into it was not tied up. Instead, he was left loose to do as he liked. The sides of the box were not very high, and so the horse could see all that went on through the iron bars at the top. I never was in a better box than that. The groom gave me some very nice oats. He patted me spoke kindly, and then went away. When I had eaten my corn, I looked round. In the space next to mine stood a little fat grey pony. He had thick hair on his head and a big tail. His head was pretty, and his nose was small. I put my head up to the iron bars at the top of my box, and said, "How do you do? What is your name?" He turned round as far as the rope round his head would allow, held up his head and said, "My name is Merrylegs. Are you going to live next door to me in the box?" I said, "Yes." "Well then," he said, "I hope you are a patient horse. I do not like anyone next door who bites." Just then a horse's head looked over from the space beyond. Her ears were laid back, and her eyes showed anger. This was a tall, red-brown female horse, with a long, handsome neck. She looked across to me and said, "So it is you who have turned me out of my box. It is a very strange thing for a young male horse like you to come and turn a lady out of her own home." "What?" I said. "I have turned no one out. The man who brought me put me here, and I had nothing to do with it. And I'm not a young horse. I have turned 4 years old, and I'm a grown-up horse. I never had a quarrel yet with any horse, and it is my wish to live in peace." "Well," she said, "we'll see. Of course, I do not want to quarrel with a young thing like you." I said no more. When she went out in the afternoon, Merrylegs said, "Ginger has a bad habit of biting and losing control of her actions. When she was in the loose box, she used to easily lose control. One day she bit James in the arm, and he bled. Miss Flora and Miss Jessie, who are very fond of me, were afraid to come into the stable. I wanted to see them very much. I hope they will now come again, if you do not bite or lose control." I told him I never bit anything but grass and corn, and could not think what pleasure Ginger found in biting. "Well, I don't think she enjoys it," said Merrylegs. "It is just a bad habit. She said that no one was ever kind to her, and why should she not bite? Of course, it is a very bad habit. But I am sure, if all she says is true, she must have been treated very badly before she came here. John does all he can to please her, and James also. Our master never hits a horse if he or she acts right. You see," he went on, with a wise look, "I am 12 years old, and I know a great deal. I can tell you there is not a better place for a horse all around the country than this. John has been here for 14 years and taken best care of us, and you never saw such a kind boy as James. It is all Ginger's own fault that she did not stay in that box.